Hey everybody, this is Kevin for crackberry.com.
Hey, it's Phil from Android Central.
Danny Urbino from Windows Phone Central.
And Rene Ritchie from iMore. And we have a very special guest with us today. We have Marcus Adelson, the CEO of Mobile Nations. How you doing, Marcus?
I'm doing great, Rene. Great to finally be on one of the podcasts.
Yeah, Kevin, how did you manage to get Marcus here?
So this is like a long time in the making, but I guess just over a year ago now, we finally did the Mobile Nations rebranding. Obviously, before that, we have Smartphone Experts branding. And Marcus, the history of that goes back how long? 10 years plus?
10 years plus. So Visor Central, you know, all the hardcore Palm geeks or ex-Palm that went into the Visor. Visor Central was launched on 9/9/99.
Wow.
So coming up on a little over 13 years here soon, I think. And then we rolled from Visor Central into Trio Central. Obviously, the Trio was the smartphone, and but we figured, you know, maybe Palm won't last. You know, maybe there's going to be some competitors in that space. So that's when we hooked up with Kevin and we got crackberry, and we launched Windows mobile site at the time, WM Expert, and then eventually the iPhone came out in 2007 and went through a lot of different iterations of that, from Phone Different to the iPhone blog to Tippy to iMore. But yeah, glad to be here. I've not been actively blogging since early part of this decade. Been running the back office and the store operations and making sure everything flows. But I think, you know, in 2013 I'll get back on doing some blogging at least. That'll make Kevin happy.
Well, and this is the thing, right? So when I guess I became my second personality of Chief Media Officer for Mobile Nations, I made a list of goals. And one of these goals was, you know, we had Phil already full commitment on the site, but Rene and Dan were both competing with other jobs and priorities. And those were two things we had to check off. And now we've done it, right? We can actually podcast during the day because Rene and Dan have no other responsibilities in making their sites rock and roll.
I have no responsibilities here whatsoever.
Yep, totally let myself go.
and on that same list, it said Marcus must get on Twitter and start blogging and podcasting. And the reason for that is we have so many smart, passionate, talented people within Mobile Nations network, and not all of them are visible to our audience. And if there's one guy, you know, in addition to everybody on this show today who I love, or our regular cast, talking to Marcus about mobile is just awesome because he has such a long history in it. He knows everything about it, and he's very, what's the word? Pragmatic, unbiased. You're after, you know, I think the visor went away, your loyalty is to nobody except the best experience. So it's always a really balanced conversation.
He was, I did a search result for CES way back in the day, and Marcus and Michael Ducker were there covering it, and I think with real media, just to show you how hardcore that was at the time.
That was, you know, we did our first podcast before the podcast term was invented, right? So in early 2000, we were doing live radio shows using the Real Media server. You need to have the Real Media client. And we actually had a live show where we did dial-ins, and we did interviews with the PR people from Palm, and we had guest people call in, and it was all way before its time. Did live streaming from CES and CTAI back in the days. Yeah, so yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. And as Kevin said, I am fairly platform agnostic because I have to keep up with it, right? I got to compete with you guys. So this is my stack of phones I'm using at the moment, from the S3 to I guess it's a Focus. I'm waiting on a better Windows phone, I guess the Lumia. And then the Galaxy Nexus and the iPhone 5. So trying to stay up on the market to keep up with you guys.
Yeah. And I think the timing of this show today, you know, for one, it's the silly season of mobile. I think this year it's maybe more silly than even normal. You know, we had our iPhone 5, but now we have Windows Phone 8 launching in a couple of weeks. We've got, well, Phil, you always have something new. And I think, Rene, you have a big Apple event tomorrow.
Yes, sir. We have the iPad/Mac event where everyone expects to see the iPad mini.
And we're going to touch on all those today, but I think one of the reasons why I wanted Marcus on today is because, you know, all the mobile news is fun, but I think the Mobile Nations news is getting really exciting now. And it'll be this week or next week, Marcus, you can fill us in, that we finally start to take the Mobile Nations name and make it more than just our branding for the network. We finally start to put some technology together, and we're going to be rolling out Mobile Nations Passport, which becomes our sort of single identity for a user across our site. So if you're a user on any of the sites, you can then very easily jump over and begin participating on another site in a click without having to manage 5 separate user IDs and email addresses and passwords to access all our content. So Marcus, I want you to give us kind of the run through of what that's all about, because our hardcore people are listening and they're probably the ones who will have the most existing accounts across all our sites.
Sure. So for existing users, a couple of great new benefits. One is that we'll have one profile going forward. So we're going to automatically, if you have multiple accounts that share the same email address and username, we're going to automatically link them across the forums. If you have different usernames and different emails, you can manually link them, but we're going to try to drive you to having one Mobile Nations profile. And we have the tools to let you automatically merge those accounts. So if you have been a very active member on Android Central, or let's say BlackBerry in the past, and you're now a member of Android Central, once you merge your accounts, your post count is going to be cumulative. You're going to have one that says your post count for this site. Then you'll also have the network post count. So you can kind of move your kudos with you between the different sites. And if you just want to head over to iMore and make a comment on the blog or in the forums, instead of having to go through the whole process of creating a whole new account, you land on iMore, you click log in, and at that point, it will pick up that you're a Passport member, and it will set up your account, and it will refresh. You won't even notice, and it'll just say, welcome to iMore. And at that point, you have the iMore account. So we don't force you to become a member of any of the other sites if you don't want to. But when you do head over to one of the other sites and click register or log in, we will do that automatically for you. The other nice thing is that we're finally adding all the major social login components. So Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft account, and Google accounts. So if you're an existing user, you can link your Passport profile to all or any of those. So you don't need to log in and log out of the site. You can, if you're already logged in on one of those providers. And that's also a great benefit for new member registrations. You just hit the new register page. You click on your Google account. If you're an Android guy, or on Windows Phone, you may click on the Microsoft logo, because you certainly will have a Microsoft account. And we'll set everything up for you. You'll be a member with 2 clicks. And we're not doing any type of pushing of stuff to your feeds yet. We're just doing the single sign-on. But future stuff we're looking at is that when you leave a comment or you make a forum post, we'll give you the option to share that with your social network. But it's not anything we're pushing on you. And then what's going to be exciting in future releases is that we're going to keep building up this profile page. So you can put in which device you have, which carrier you have, what's your device history. And we're going to build nice lists and objects inside your user profile that people can access from the forums. So you can more easily share that information.
So it's like the elite of the elite of the elite awesomeness of Mobile Nations all in one place.
It'll be very nice. And we got what's going to be nice having this one roaming profile is that we'll be able to do a lot of new features tied to it. You put in your time zone one time, all of the article posts, all of the forums are going to be tied to your specific locale. You put in your country. Over time, we're going to start featuring content specific for that country or continent, depending where you are. You may not be that interested in all the T-Mobile news or AT&T news that Phil puts up on Android Central, but we'll be able to float carrier news that are specific to your region more easily.
Okay, Marcus, no giving away all the secrets, though.
No, we're not. That's we have a lot of exciting stuff in the pipeline.
But the nice thing for me is that we have a lot of members who move sites now. Like maybe they have a BlackBerry and then they moved over to Android, and they would start at the forums. They would look like they were a brand new first day smartphone user. And this way, at least, even if it's a separate forum, people kind of know your history in Mobile Nations.
Oh, exactly. And so the join date and the forum count is gonna carry through. And over time, we're going to add a little bit more achievements levels in addition to just the post count. So you have an identifier of how active you are, how active a poster, active a commenter. So you can kind of people can get that impression from your post bit very quickly. And we're also trying out some exciting stuff that if you're an active member of other forums and you want to share that kudos on our site, we'll let you do that as well.
So Phil will no longer be a 10-poster noob on iMore.
Exactly. And I will be able to carry through my 1,000 Visor Central posts, so they will show up on iMore. I have the same issue there.
Well, wait, though. Phil will still be a noob on iMore, but at least he'll say, hey, this isn't his first phone. He's also an Android Windows Mobile expert.
How do you root an iPhone?
Very gently.
No, it's really exciting. And I mean, obviously, this has been one of the features that's been asked for literally years. And the reason it hasn't been done sooner is because it is really, really hard to do this and do this well. And I mean, I've watched Marcus and the tech team tackle this now, and it's really a slick, state-of-the-art sort of integration, the way it's going to work. So, you know, once we pull the trigger, there will be this kind of one-time upgrade process to take your existing, you know, site accounts to become the Mobile Nations Passport account. But once that happens, it's like butter.
Yeah, at that point, it's seamless. I think it's 97% of people, you know, they'll just see an interstitial, and we're going to ask them, do you have any other accounts? We didn't find any other accounts. You get the option then to tell us. If not, you just click, I don't have any other accounts, and you're on your way. You can easily create new accounts from that point on. If you do have other accounts, you're going to have to put those in. One of the complications is that there's about 1% of the users where we have conflicting usernames. Obviously, we have 5 separate user databases today. So someone is going to have maybe Kevin on Crackberry, and we're going to have a different person be Kevin on iMore. So we had to be fair about that. So the most active user with that unique username is going to get to keep it. The other one is going to become Kevin #IM. He's still going to be able to log in as Kevin for a while during the transition process. But that's very few people that's going to be affected. Only about 1,800 people that are active at the moment. So
Dan's going to lose his username on every other site.
So if you do have multiple usernames at the moment, to help through that process, Kevin did put up a post a few weeks back. Please make sure that your email address is the same across the different sites. If you have the same username, if not, no big deal. You'll just have to manually do it when Passport goes live.
And what I'm also really excited about, then we'll move on to news, is, you know, we're at a point where we have 9 million plus readers a month, 50 million page views a month. I think the combined user base, Marcus, is around 5 million users of logged in people, or people with existing accounts. And, you know, this is really setting us up as a platform now to just keep growing continuously. And we've been, you know, talking behind the scenes about rolling out some other things maybe next year beyond our individual platform sites. And, you know, because there's topics that kind of bridge all the platforms now that we can cover. And what's great is if we roll those out, and when we roll those out, it's an immediate click, one click, and you're in and participating on those properties. So,
everyone gets the benefit immediately.
Yeah, exactly. I think, you know, one of our ongoing, not challenges, but one of the things that's been out there in the past is, you know, all of our sites kind of operate individually. And a lot of people don't realize how they are tied together. And when you tie our things together, we really have literally the broadest and deepest footprint in mobile that you're going to find anywhere. And I think this process starts to really package everything we do together. So I'm excited about that. Spread the word. I think everybody's going to love it. And Rene, let's talk news now.
Awesome. So I'm going to go in order of events this year. I get the first event because it's tomorrow. Tomorrow, Apple, and Phil Nickinson set this up perfectly for me. Tomorrow, Apple invents the small tablet. Phil, thank you for that.
You know, and I think about it, well, I was obviously tongue-in-cheek with that. Maybe I really wasn't. Maybe they really are inventing the small tablet market tomorrow. I mean, not that there hasn't been one with the likes of the Kindle Fire and the Barnes & Noble Nook, and now with the Nexus 7 for the past few months.
The Playbook.
But, I'm sorry, the what?
Playbook.
Do you have a link for that, Kevin? We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Well, here's my question, and I've been asking this a lot on the iMore show. When you look at the tablet market, Apple is doing a very traditional, you give us money, we give you a shiny box. If you want to buy stuff, that's fine, but we've made our money, our relationship is over. Where if you look at, for example, Amazon, they're giving you a really cheap tablet, but they're subsidizing it with content. So they literally cannot afford to sell that tablet in any country where there's no content store. And that's only like a handful of stores right now. So Apple concede iPad, like the iPad mini will likely be in 90 plus countries within very few months. And their competition is only going to be in a few countries. And I wonder if that iTunes advantage has always been Apple's ace in the hole.
Coming at it from that side of things, I think was, you know, just genius, especially in hindsight. I mean, you've got the store, you've got the platform, right? And then whatever hardware you throw at it is kind of icing on that cake. You know, very important icing, but you know, just it makes that that whole deal really sweet. And that's why I'm actually really excited to finally get the new iTunes coming out. But this month, right?
Yeah, they announced iTunes. It was very odd. I mean, I think Apple with Steve Jobs had a very emotional, very passionate, very sort of a gut feeling for how they did things. And I think Tim Cook is more analytical. He crunches numbers, he looks at supply chains, and he does the math to see where things happen. And that maybe is a longer process. So up until the last minute, I wasn't sure if it was an iPhone and iPod event last month or an iPhone and iPad event. But now it was clearly iPhone and iPod last month and iPad and Macs this month. And iTunes was announced last month, but it's only shipping this month. And it makes me wonder if Apple is still doing something else. We always heard these rumors that iOS 6 wasn't finished. There were more features that iTunes is legacy now, Kevin, right? I mean, like managing stuff on your desktop. I have an iPod Touch. I can't put iTunes Match on that when I'm off Wi-Fi. Sorry, not that iPod. I have an iPod Nano. I cannot put iTunes Match on that. I have to use a computer and a cable to put media on that. And it makes me feel like I'm living in the year 2000.
Yeah, and I think Apple admits that iTunes is garbage, right? It's not even a question mark out there. Everybody knows it needs to be updated. So
God forbid you use it on Windows.
Well, that's just it. It's revenge for Office Mac. But maybe Dan can address this too. It's the only app that Apple has to port to Windows. So they kind of put everything together and port it once, which is kind of what Microsoft has to face because you have users on Mac and on other platforms as well.
Yeah, iTunes on Windows, as Phil was alluding to, is absolutely terrible. So I'm still not convinced that just because they're updating it, it's going to be necessarily a good experience. But, perhaps it will be for once. But, I mean, it would have to have completely redone the app from the bottom up in order to make it a decent experience. And I still think, although Microsoft is a little behind here as far as execution, their ecosystem is just as strong as Apple's. As far as the music, Xbox Music just launched last week and it has 18 million songs and it's going to go up higher than that soon. And I think it's supposed to go up to 30 million eventually.
Do we care about desktop anymore though, Dan?
In a lot of countries too.
Do you care about desktop or you just want to put the stuff on your device and go?
I care about desktop a little bit. I only sync on occasion though. I do most of my music downloading just over Wi-Fi directly on the phone. But Windows Phone 8 has a nice solution for this, for syncing. There's actually a couple different options. I can't really go into details about it, but there's going to be quite a few options, including things for if you're an Apple iTunes user. You can
tell us what you know.
You can easily, move over to Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8 with all that stuff.
So Marcus, I mean, you have all those different phones. How do you manage your media? Do you use a separate service for each phone? Do you try to form some sort of sane single solution?
No. So on the media side, I stick with iTunes and iPhone 5. I did upload most of my music into the Google Play, so I can stream that on my Android devices. But that is a pain point. And because I buy quite a few phones, I usually get the smallest memory size version of them, and I just can't fit that much media on them. So syncing syncing all my iTunes content, which is now DRM free, up until Google Play has worked pretty well, but it's still a mess, to manage that.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting tomorrow because I think the iPad mini is one of Apple's 100 million device plays. Like, there's been rumors it'll be more expensive than we originally heard it. I'm not sure about those rumors yet. I still think it's going to be cheap. I think Apple sees people on planes using Kindles and they would rather those people be using iPads. But the current iPad is just a little bit too expensive for some people and a little bit too big and heavy for others. And Kevin, I mean, you saw this with with Playbook. The Playbook originally came out at a pretty steep price, but when it dropped down in price, the market kind of exploded. And I think that's the economic graph Apple has to draw out for this product.
Yeah, I guess the question is, though, do you need a deep discount to make that demand, or do you have it if you start at that price point? I mean, think about the touchpad, right? Nobody bought touchpads. And then when they were, what was it, $99 or $199, they sold out immediately. Yeah,
but that's not a sustainable model. I mean, it's the same with Apple. I mean, Apple's never really undercut prices. They've always sold at premium because once you cut the price, you can't go back up. This is the same issue with the Surface that a lot of people are talking about. Everybody said, oh, they should have made it $299.
Well, that was a rumor, right, Dan? It was a $200 rumor?
Yeah, that was in gadgets. Yeah, that was a little off. But had they done that, I mean, they would have undercut. First of all, there's no way the device cost way more than that to make. So they would have lost money. They've also would have ticked off their OEM partners. But the third thing is you can never actually go back up in price, right? So once you undercut and you go really low, like the $99, WebOS tablet, it could have never gone back up to $200 or $300. No one ever bought it. So I think Apple, what is the rumored price for the iPad mini? Is it, let me guess, $399?
We heard $200 to $250, but over the weekend, 9 to 5 Mac heard $329, which is an odd sounding Apple price for me. They're usually pretty close to a solid dollar figure.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think that $70 delta, is going to convince a lot of people to buy the mini over a basic iPad, right?
Yes, you can get an iPad 2 for $400, an iPad 3 for $500. But Apple doesn't consider being smaller a cheaper thing. They consider being smaller a mobility and a feature of the product. So they've always, like the iPod Mini wasn't that much cheaper than the iPod Classic, but it could fit in your pocket. I still think they're going to go for a cheaper play on this. But Phil, I think Apple might have expected the Fire and the Nexus 7 to have sold a lot more than they did. So I wonder how they're viewing the tablet market now, because there's no clear leader already in the small tablet space.
Yeah, in Apple, I think has the larger base to pull from, because there are already so many people with iPhones and iPads. Whereas if you're getting a Kindle Fire or a Nook or a Nexus 7, you're kind of coming in blind, maybe a little bit. Probably not so much the Nexus 7. That's probably a little more nerdy than consumer, I think. And obviously Apple, like we said earlier, has the ecosystem, and that's a big thing. It'll be interesting to see, and not to get away from Apple yet, but it'll be interesting to see next week how the Nexus 7 gets positioned, because they're going to bring out a new 32 gigabyte SKU, and sounds like we're almost definitely getting a 10-inch new 10-inch tablet from Samsung. And Samsung's been in the Android tablet space from the beginning, and the Galaxy Tab kind of fizzled, but they never killed it. I mean, we've got a Tab 2. I mean, we have like 17 different varieties of Galaxy Tabs from Samsung
in half-inch increments.
It's nuts. So it'll be interesting to see what Google does. I mean, I think the huge discrepancy in tablet markets right now really comes down to marketing. And I mean, just the way they're presented to the consumer.
Phil, how come Samsung is so successful with the Galaxy line and they cannot reproduce that on the tablet side?
A lot of it had to do with the OS, I think. It's just with the iPad, you knew what you were getting, right? You knew, all right, here's the same sort of paradigm that you get with the iPhone. Android didn't really translate to that. Even with Honeycomb, I'm not crazy about it. And from Honeycomb to Ice Cream Sandwich to Jelly Bean now, it works better in a 7-inch tablet. But a 10-inch tablet, it was just this big giant landscape with a couple icons on it, and then you have to figure out what to do. Right? With the iPad, it's simpler. It's here are all my apps, and that's it. You just run apps. It'll be interesting to see, what Google does with that. In starting with the Nexus 7. You had these huge widgets on there pointing to all of your content. So this was very much a media consumption device. And, oh, yeah, here are your apps down at the bottom. I think they've got a long way to grow in that. And this was just really a first step. So the question is, how big a leap are they going to make?
What's interesting is another big rumor for the Apple event tomorrow is that Apple believes that books are going to be the battleground for the small form factor tablet. And Amazon has a huge lead in terms of catalog. The original Amazon book format was crappy. It was like black and white photocopies of books put onto a digital format. And iBooks was way better, but they had no titles. And now Kindle has got a new format, much richer. Apple's going to be expanding their titles. Maybe Kevin and then Dan, do you think that Kevin, does Playbook need to compete as an ebook reader the way Kindle and iPad mini do? And do you think that BlackBerry is positioned to start doing that media competition?
Yeah, I think BlackBerry's been pretty clear about their strategy here, which is they only want to do and put their energy and time into the things they know they're best at, and then work with the best partners when that makes sense too. And that's the BlackBerry 10 strategy. In the past, I think RIM's tried to do a lot of things on their own, outside of their core, what they do well. And some of that has fizzled a little bit, like BBM Music, for example, which, started as kind of a music sharing social network. And I don't know how many people use it, but it's not that many. So I think for books, you're going to see them work with Kobo. They've already announced that, App World with BlackBerry 10 is now getting music downloads, movie rentals, movie purchasing, and all that kind of stuff, which is a huge boost because one of our biggest complaints with RIM has been the lack of this ecosystem surrounding just apps. But now I will be able to use my BlackBerry ID, which I can pay with carrier billing, credit card billing, or PayPal, to buy not only apps, but all this other content also. So I think they're going to do a good enough job now on that, where, you know, I can buy my mom a playbook and she can go on a trip tomorrow, and the night before she can go spend $50 buying whatever she wants easily, you know, without thinking or without calling me for help on how to do it, which is a good change for them.
So I'm going to ask the absolute worst question of this podcast, and it's aimed squarely at Daniel Rubino, because I am so confused by Windows 8 on tablets, and I think a lot of people are confused. So, I mean, you're going to have the Windows 8 RT, Windows 8 Pro, you're going to have Microsoft Surface, you'll have OEM tablets, there's some Microsoft deal with Nook, which I still don't understand. Can you bring some sanity to what Microsoft is going to be doing with tablets for me, please?
Well, first of all, I don't think there's too much confusion yet. There may be. We haven't, because this hasn't launched yet, so it's not available in stores.
I could pre-order.
What a lot of people are talking about is from the tech side and the people who are privy to, you know, what Microsoft's upcoming devices are. We haven't actually seen though yet if people are confused by this strategy, and it remains to be seen if Microsoft actually explains it, which they still have time to do because this hasn't launched yet. So the issue though is, there's two types of Windows. There's Windows 8 RT and Windows 8 Pro. RT runs just new apps. It's the new style of apps for Windows. Windows 8 Pro runs the new apps plus the old apps, all the stuff from Windows 7, Vista, and on down XP. And that's a two different things. So an RT tablet is equivalent to what the iPad is to OS X. You know, it can run all new style apps, but they're not directly transferable to the desktop OS. But it has that new Metro experience with, you know, and then you can go back to the old version with the Pro devices. So Pro devices are just that. They're meant for high-end features. They're basically a full-on Windows laptop minus the keyboard, which of course you can attach on. And so that's kind of the main difference. The Barnes & Noble thing, no one really knows yet. They have formed a company, a little holding company together, but no one knows that strategy. Presumably they're going to come out with some sort of tablet device, and or Barnes & Noble reader will be brought over to Windows. I imagine Amazon Kindle will also, of course, have a reader on Windows. So, having said that, the Surface RT is, the pre-order seems to be selling very well, and Windows 8 is actually a really great experience. I've been using it, the RTM version, for a couple weeks now. And to be honest, the new app style is enough for me for a tablet. So an RT tablet is just good enough, mostly because you're still getting, you know, your micro SD expansion, your full USB ports, 2 cameras, and all the other features that come with a really nice tablet.
I'm going to call in Marcus again on this one. So Marcus, when Apple released the iPad, it was an iOS tablet. There is no OS X tablet. You can only walk in a store. You can only get, you know, right now one tablet, maybe soon one tablet in 2 sizes. Android only has Android tablets. There's no Chrome tablets that I'm aware of yet, maybe.
Correct.
So what do you Microsoft says it's no compromises. You can get full Windows or you can get tablet RT Windows. Apple says we're going to make that choice for you. We're going to give you a tablet experience. What do you think of these different messages?
Well, I saw that blog post yesterday on one of the Windows sites, you know, where they did criticize Microsoft's approach to this. I mean, I do agree with Dan that we haven't given Microsoft a chance to explain it yet. But there is a price differential between the Windows, between the Surface RT and the Pro, right? Quite a bit. So I can imagine a lot of people walking into Best Buy or Office Depot, you know, oh, the new Windows tablet, I'll give that a try, bring that hope and realize it's not really a Windows tablet at all, at least not in the way that they are used to it being. They can only run very few desktop apps on an RT1, right? Only the native ones that come bundled on the device. And there's a very limited selection of RT apps in the market today. Obviously, that's going to grow over time. This is the Windows ecosystem we're talking about. So it all comes down to Microsoft doing the proper marketing there. They're also calling the Windows 8 phones the Windows 8 phones, right? So there's going to be a lot of this Windows branding on stuff that's not directly compatible. It would be like if Apple called everything the Mac OS. You have the Mac OS phone, the Mac OS tablet, and the Mac OS desktop. And it's going to create some confusion for sure. We'll just have to see how well Microsoft does in explaining it.
Yeah, I mean, in this sense, they almost didn't have a choice. The reason they're doing the full Pro version is, it's of course for enterprise, right? So those are people who really going to need this device. Whereas an iPad has always been sort of a compromise between, running the simple iOS apps versus OS 10. This will allow enterprise users to run everything they need to. You can run Photoshop on a Pro device, which is pretty incredible. Whereas the RT device, I would say, is more in line with the iPad, where, we've always made this distinction how, like, the iPad, for a lot of us at least, is better for consumption than production of media. And I would say the same thing with the Surface RT on any kind of RT tablet. Better for just consuming media and just quick go. It works with Xbox with the Smart Glass, and you get a lot of, full functionality there. And we're launching with at least, right, as of a week or two ago, they already had 2,000 apps in the store, which is pretty impressive considering it hasn't launched yet. And that's expected to grow, exponentially as, the season goes on.
And those are RT apps, the 2,000?
Right, yeah.
And how do they convert back into a Windows Phone 8 app? Is it easy to cross-develop for that? Or are they completely separate SDKs?
No, there's definitely, they're separate SDKs, but they overlap significantly. So if you write an app, say, in Windows Phone 8, I think you can recycle, it depends on the app, but roughly 80% of it, especially some of the graphics, which, the design, at least in the graphics, you still need to scale them higher. But the actual core of the apps are very similar because they're built off of the same kernel. So if you're writing a Windows Phone 8 app, to go write an RT app is very simple. We've already seen quite a few games converted over and some other apps. A lot of Twitter clients have been converted over to the Windows 8 RT style. And they're very nice. It's going to take a little while for people to figure out the Metro style on the desktop, how that's going to work. But, and vice versa. If you write a Windows 8 RT app, converting it to Windows Phone is also, it's going to be a much simpler experience compared to Android or iOS.
At the DOS prompt, I just type win and hit return, right, Dan?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's not a one-to-one yet. And maybe someday they'll get to that, where it's an exact same codes and you just code for one and that. But it's roughly like between like 70, 90%, depending on your app, where you can recycle a lot of the same code. So you're going to see, I think, a lot of code development. It's going to be really good for Windows Phone developers because that market is small, whereas this one has a lot more potential to, grow quickly. So if you're recoding for one, you might as well code for the other and double your market, essentially. And so I think that's a huge selling point for a lot of developers.
What's interesting, too, though, and I don't know if this is a problem for Phil or not, or for Phil's users, but I can potentially walk into a store and think I need a tablet, and there'll be the iPad, the Playbook, which are very unified, integrated, strongly branded products. And then to the left, there might be a Samsung Windows RT tablet, a Samsung Windows 8 Pro tablet, a Samsung Android tablet. And I'm a Samsung user, Phil. What do I start doing when I see and I know this existed with phones before, but what do I start doing when I see my tablet brand with different operating systems on it?
So at my local Best Buy here, it is such a mess. I hate the way it's set up. You walk, way in the back by the computers, and you've got your Apple section, and that makes sense, right? You've got Macs, you've got laptops, you've got iPads, you've got, I get where everything is. And then they have like the other tablet section, which is everything. So you've got stuff from Acer, Samsung, and Samsung can be, broken out a little bit, I think, but it's just all these tablets. I'm not sure if they have Lenovo in there. Just so many. And some of that is just retail, right? That's how it works. Samsung probably pays a little more, cuts them a break on how much it costs Best Buy to buy the tablets for resale. And from there they get better placement. But it's not good. If I were just a normal civilian,
our moms,
going in,
our dads,
right, exactly, and was going to buy a tablet, and I saw all these, I would be scared to death, and I would just walk over and buy an iPad, probably.
So, I think that is a problem for Android, right? It is the same issue with the phones. It's worked out better for the phones because I think Samsung has the Galaxy has really become the Android phone. It's the same kind of issue people worry about Nokia and Windows Phone, right? That Nokia and their Lumia are becoming Windows Phone. Microsoft seems to be fighting that a little bit.
Until the Surface phone, Dan.
Huh?
Until the Surface phone.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a sec. But so Android has this kind of issue. The phone side, it's becoming the Galaxy phone, right? That's almost becoming the default Android device. And I hear people talk about it all the time in public here now. But as far as tablets go, it's not clear cut. You do have this, there's no unified approach, no unified UI, so it's a hard sell because every device looks completely different. I'd also say the 10.1 tab, I had bought my girlfriend one for Christmas. And at first she really liked it, but she ended up selling it a couple of weeks ago, which was a touchy subject because it was a gift. But she couldn't stand it. It was just like the browser was crashing, and she just had all sorts of like, and she's good with tech. She ended up going back to an MSI Wind from 6 years ago running Windows 7 because it was a much better experience. So there is this issue with Android and tablets. It has so much potential because it's cheap, it's modifiable, but they still just haven't been able to sell that message. And this is where I think Microsoft and Apple have a little bit better of a message, because despite the difference with RT and Pro, every time you turn one of those devices on, it's going to look the same. And that's the same unified UI. There's going to be some core differences as far as the hardware. But for the most part, they all look the same. And that image, when you walk in, you go see 5 tablets, but they all look the same, is a strong message. That's something that Android can't take advantage of. And so I think it's working to its detriment right now.
So before we skip over to Surface phones, and my question for Kevin will be whether RIM can still concentrate on phones and tablets at this time. But Phil, I've heard rumors about all these Nexus I coming your way. And you know, maybe there'll be Nexus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, Frankenberry. I'm not sure at this point. What is your best take on what we're going to see from Google for the rest of this year?
So October 29th, we've got an event in New York City in the morning. I think we're definitely going to see an LG Nexus phone, probably. I still have in the back of my head it might not be called Nexus. They might be really changing that up. I have nothing to base that off of, and it kind of goes against all the leaks. But I got a feeling they're kind of changing their philosophy about that. Maybe not. We're probably going to see a 10-inch tablet from Samsung. I mean, I've seen stuff that we haven't published yet. The timing could be a little different. I've seen some things that said, well, they might hold off till next year. The Next Web published something this weekend that said, no, it's coming, next week. So we've got that. And then, Android 4.2 is sitting out there, but that's probably going to be just kind of I hate to say minor update because they're a big deal for a lot of people. But it'll be a minor-ish update. But Google still has this living room ecosystem type thing just lurking, right? So we had the Nexus Q, this little sphere that lights up that they might have killed, might not have killed. It's kind of in limbo right now, at least as far as public information is concerned.
I loved it in Lost with Tom Hanks, by the way. It was my favorite character.
Yeah. I should really put a hat on mine. They're so close to really starting to not take on the Xbox. There are too many Xboxes out there to really say that, but to enter that space and to do it in a way that works. And there's some big hurdles to do that. And one is just to get people to try these things in the first place, and because it's a big purchase. And if I, have the opportunity to buy an Xbox or a Nexus Q, I mean, you're going to get a lot more mileage out of an Xbox. That's not to say that the Q is bad, that the idea is bad, that the ecosystem is bad, because it definitely isn't. But it's certainly not at that level yet. So, at least one phone, tablet, probably see a 32 gigabyte Nexus 7, which everybody's freaking out about, but it's the Nexus 7 with more storage. The other question about the Nexus phones is whether they're going to do more than one. And that goes back to a Wall Street Journal story months ago, where they basically said more than one company is going to get an early shot at the operating system before the code's dropped. And at the time, everyone took it to be, they're going to be 5 Nexuses. Well, not necessarily. So we'll see. I'm betting on fewer rather than more, because it just doesn't make sense for every company to have basically a developer phone, right? That doesn't make sense.
Which doesn't sell particularly well compared to their carrier.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're more consumer friendly than they used to be. And I know, soccer moms who have a Galaxy Nexus, and they're perfectly good phones. But I don't see there being, 4 and 5 and 6 models out there.
Yeah, so I guess, Kevin, what I'm interested with you is RIM is now trying to get BB10 out. I mean, does RIM even have time to worry about tablets right now, or are they focused right on the phones? They know what they're getting into with iPhone 5, with all the Lumias coming, with all the Androids coming. Where's their attention, and where should it be?
Sure. So they've been really clear about what they're doing and why there's been some of this delay right now. And it's that they're not building what they consider to be a phone operating system. BlackBerry 10 is a mobile computing platform. And that means they're putting all the plumbing in underneath to make it work in a very in-depth way across different devices. So whether it's tablets or phones, or even as we saw in last week's announcements with automobiles, where, QNX is already in a lot of cars, and now they're starting to leverage the BlackBerry 10 development tools, giving that to automotive manufacturers to do their infotainment systems and everything else. So it's really a platform play. The CEO has said, look, tablets are absolutely in our future. We're not worrying so much about computers, because to them it means, with the processors now in these devices, you have computing desktop power in a mobile device. So they want a future where your phone or tablet is something you carry with you between your home and office. When you get to the office, it just automatically connects to your peripherals, whether it's a monitor or keyboard or mouse or anything like that. And that thing has enough power to do everything you're doing today on a computer.
Mobile brain.
It's your hub. That is your life on that small device you take with you. But they're not stupid, right? They're focusing on getting the phones out the door and onto the market. They know they have to be good enough because that's what keeps them in business, allowing them to do tablets and everything else. So they're doing both, but I think part of the delay you saw from RIM is making sure they got everything in order on the platform side. So that's done with the first device. So the first device is the hardest. After that, they can move much quicker because all that underlying framework is together.
So is it, and I'll get both you and Dan on this, is it a battle for third place right now? Because Android has such a huge market share. Apple has such a huge profit share. Are you guys slugging it out for the third place, or is there room for both platforms?
I'll let Kevin go.
Start? Sure. I mean, RIM already owns third place, right? I mean, there's 80 million BlackBerry users in mobile devices with phones today. If you add in all the cars that run it, we're doing well, but that is a mobile device, right?
Dan's counting every Xbox computer. Then.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll stick to phones and tablets. But I think RIM, where it's a little different, is it's one manufacturer that has all these carrier relationships around the world right now. The difference with maybe Dan's situation is that he's dealing with Windows Phone 8 being a platform, and there's companies like Nokia and others who are going to be the ones selling to carriers. And I think RIM's existing relationships gets them into a very big global launch right away. Kind of like we see with iOS, or we saw with the S3 now, where you have a very big launch globally of a couple of well-marketed, well-branded devices. And RIM's a startup right now with $2 billion in the bank, 80 million potential users already who are customers. Hopefully they'll get a good chunk of them upgrading. And I think they have a better base than Microsoft, because put it this way, RIM's given Microsoft every chance over the last 18 months to make Windows Phone 7 a success, and they failed miserably at it. So they need to prove Windows Phone 8's that different, but I think customers still don't know why they should buy it. Maybe the enterprise angle with Windows Phone 8 is a little bit stronger than Windows Phone 7, and Microsoft does have hooks in enterprise. So there's a bit of a battle on, but whether you can have both of them surviving too for the long haul, it might take a while, right, before anybody goes away.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not as positive, obviously, on RIM. I think RIM has done a lot of good stuff in the past, but I mean, the example of that Windows Phone 7 still hasn't sort of caught on and dominated this third spot in the last 2 years is relevant. And it goes to show you how difficult it is. I mean, Microsoft has a lot of power, a lot of clout, and a lot of reach, and they still haven't been able to do this. And they've been using HTC, Nokia, Samsung, and it's been very difficult to crack. Android and iOS are clearly the dominant players, and there's this question if there is room for third place. And I think there is, but it's going to come from carriers now starting to jump on the Windows Phone bandwagon. And we're starting to see this. Even Verizon is supposedly getting ready to position Windows Phone up against Android and iOS because they don't like these two dominant players, controlling everything when it comes to mobile devices. So you're starting to see the carriers now pushing Windows Phone. I think that's going to play the bigger role. Now, of course, RIM's big problem here is just simply time. Their devices are going to come out much later after the Windows Phone 8 launch. We're seeing strong feedback for the Lumia 920 already, with pre-orders doing extremely well, selling out some countries. And I think this will be this message with Windows Phone 8, Windows 8 Desktop, the new Xbox 360 interface, the tablets. When that first week of November comes around and all this stuff goes live, it's going to be just a massive, massive play. It's something that RIM can never compete with because Microsoft has a whole ecosystem already. They have video, they have music, they have the gaming system, they have the desktop OS, now they have tablets, they have phones. Can't compete with that. And it doesn't mean that Microsoft's going to necessarily succeed, but I think they have a much better chance than RIM does.
Where does the Surface Phone fit in, Dan?
So the Surface Phone we don't know necessarily the motivation for it. Is it a plan B strategy in case Windows Phone 8 doesn't take off? In which case Microsoft may step back and go, hey, we're going to do our own phone and control this. Is it a play to be sort of like Android with the Nexus device where the typical straight up Nexus device is usually sold right through Google, direct, unlocked, just stripped down. Microsoft may do the same, where they just sell this phone through the Microsoft Store and their online stores direct to customers, bypassing the carriers. Because it's the same reason, right, that Microsoft doesn't like working with carriers either, because they control everything. So they can just sell directly to customers. And that won't necessarily tick off their OEMs because there'll be still a small market, just like the Surfaces. Everybody talks about the Surface, this and that. Fact is, you can only buy it online and in Microsoft stores. And so that doesn't necessarily compete with OEMs for, like, say, at Best Buy. And so, what that actually means, I don't know. Now, the Surface phone, what it is also, we don't know. We just heard it's different. But could it be, we've heard things that it's a gaming phone, which may be geared more towards, like, an Xbox type device with, game controls and all that. This is something that everybody's been telling Microsoft to do for years. Just release an Xbox type phone.
X phone with Halo, Dan, please.
Right. So it may be something like that, but we really don't know. It's still too early to tell, and who knows if it'll see the light of day. But Microsoft is clearly turning into a hardware company. They always have been sort of a hardware company. People, their keyboards, their, more peripherals.
Wait, I remember Bill Gates being on stage with Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs trotting out that famous Alan Kay saying about people who love software want to make their own hardware, and Bill going, we kind of disagree about that.
Yeah, and I mean, there was obviously it worked for Microsoft in the long run, right? The PC market is completely dominated now by Microsoft, but there is room for them, I think, to do their own devices, not necessarily compete one-to-one against their OEM partners, but to sort of set the bar. That seems to be like that's the whole point of Surface. It's not to tell Lenovo and Samsung, hey, get out of the picture, we're going to do this ourselves. It's to go, hey, this is sort of the device, the level we're setting. Now you guys can build off of that and outdo us. And I think Microsoft's encouraging these companies to outdo them, because in the end, that just wins for consumers. And so I'm okay with this approach, and I think it's going to work out for them in the long run.
Marcus, what interests me is that there's this theory of auteur that you have to have the dictator, and Steve Jobs was absolutely the dictator at Apple. Remains to be seen what Tim Cook does in that role, but Apple had very clear leadership. You can say what you want about Lazaridis and Balsillie at RIM, but they loved those BlackBerries, used them every day. They were very focused on that. At Android, you have Andy Rubin, you have very strong leadership in Larry Page. Ballmer he gets a lot of criticism that he's not Bill Gates, that he's not as ruthless, he's not as decisive, that you have successes like the Xbox and failures like the Zune, and it's less predictable. Their batting average isn't as strong. You think that's a challenge for Microsoft? And because you've seen, Palm come and go and other platforms rise and fall, how do you see them riding out the next year?
I don't think that's as relevant for them gaining market share, right? Which is, as Dan said, Windows Phone has actually been around for a while now. And, us internally have been discussing, when is Windows Phone going to take off? And we think that's going to happen soon, right? That, we're putting more resources into WP Central and that stuff. But I don't think, Ballmer's personality is going to have much in that outcome. On the BlackBerry side, Heinz seems to have a very firm hand and has straightened up the ship. Now, as you guys mentioned, it's all about time and money. $2 billion, the bank is not that much in this game. It's a big world out there. There's a lot of professionals that may be interested in trying a new device. I think Dieter, used the term mobile accomplishers a lot. And I can totally see the new BlackBerry, going after that type of demographic. In fact, they've even said so, right? They know they can't compete with Microsoft on games and the whole Xbox Live integration. They know they can't compete with Android on, $99 phones or free phones. And iOS, that space is what it is today. But there is certainly niches for all of these, for BlackBerry to come into. And, hopefully they can be successful in that niche, but they're never going to see a repeat of what happened in the early part of this decade when they became a de facto, smartphone for consumers.
It's interesting because
enterprise. Yeah. Like I was going to say, RIM's big thing was enterprise, but now even, Kevin alluded to this.
Well, RIM's big thing was enterprise, but if you remember when they started making real money is when people started buying the curves, and they accidentally started selling the stuff to consumers.
Girls wanted to BBM with enterprise.
I was going to say that, but that's all it was, right? The whole reason people bought BlackBerries, especially the youth was because of BlackBerry Messenger. And so that was the hook. I knew people in their 20s with BlackBerries, and I was like, why do you have this? And it was just BB Messenger.
I don't, that market is never coming back, right? So now they have to go back to their core enterprise market. It's not going to be, it's never going to be iOS and Android levels. So then they're going to have the developer issue, right? They're going to have a lot of consumers that can afford to buy accessories, can afford to buy software, for these devices. They're going to be productive mobile accomplishers, if you use that word, and will they see if they can grow the ecosystem to at least such a scale to sustain that, to sustain that demographic. That will be a challenge for them. Windows, if they finally make the commitment, and obviously they have a lot of apps now in the pipeline. I think they have almost all major apps are available on Windows Phone, or will be shortly, right, Dan? So someone can easily make the switch from iOS to Windows Phone without missing a beat. When I didn't start playing with Android until about a year ago, and I was surprised that almost all of the apps I used on my iPhone, I was able to find on iOS. On Android through the Google Play Store. Now, some of them were not quite as polished, and that's understandable because the Android developers has to use the same file for multiple different screen sizes. But I was surprised that almost everything, except for some niche aviation apps, I was able to rebuy them, unfortunately, on Google Play. But I've not had that experience on with a Microsoft phone yet, and obviously nowhere near close to that on the BlackBerry 10 side.
Kevin, you biting your tongue over there?
Not quite biting my tongue. I mean, most of what Marcus said was spot on in regards to, BlackBerry's challenges and opportunities. I think one thing he missed out on the opportunity side is actually RIM in the lower end of the market. Not that they can compete with Android in turning out dirt cheap prices, but it's really about RIM's ability to leverage the NOC to offer carriers the ability to sell segmented data plans. Mm-hmm. So with Android and iOS and everybody else, a data plan is a data plan is a data plan. Once you have it, you have full access to data. And RIM can segment it off. They can say, you know what? For $3 a month, you can browse the web. For $1 a month, you can BBM. If you want to use Facebook and Twitter on your phone, that's another $2. And they're building hardware that's cheap. They might not necessarily make a ton off of it. They just get it out the door. But that gets them a subscriber number. And it gets the carriers the ability in these markets like Indonesia and India to give customers really cheap monthly data plans. And that's actually been a big part of RIM's ability to stay relevant the last couple of years while they've fallen apart in North America was that. And it sounds like with BB10, they're not losing that, right? So they are cutting out parts of the NOC, but one area where they keep it is going to be on that ability to segment data. But that seems like a short-term play, though. Not that wireless bandwidth will ever be plentiful, but a decade from now, I don't think we'll have any problems pushing a lot of bandwidth, through some highly efficient systems. So that's a little short-sighted, don't you think? I wouldn't say it's short-sighted because there's always going to be people who aren't rich in the world.
The Antarctic market, Marcus.
No, not that they aren't rich, but I think the cost of delivering the bandwidth to the phone is going to come down so much, over time that people aren't going to be willing to put up with paying for segmenting the data.
Yeah,
but I could be wrong.
Depend what part of the world you're talking about.
Kevin,
right?
is it true though?
For a long time, it'll play.
Sure.
Is it true though, Kevin, that the mobile market? I mean, you've been saying this for a long time that every phone is going to be a smartphone. And when a market matures, you start to see niche parts of that market emerge. Just like Marcus said, I mean, Microsoft tried that with the Kin early on to make a tweener device, and that didn't work. But I think we'll see more. Phil's had a Cha-Cha with a Facebook button on it. I think we'll see more of those kinds of highly targeted devices more than, very broad devices in the future.
Sure. I mean, I look at this, RIM can be a sustainable company. Even the third, fourth place, argument gone. I think RIM has a future just selling keyboard devices. And we saw it last week with this whole New York Times. There's article where, I'm embarrassed to use my BlackBerry. Yet then a lot that really brought the BlackBerry community together, including some really outspoken people who said, look, I'm going to be using a phone with a keyboard until I'm dead because I'm in this generation not growing up with a touchscreen where I want that. And for RIM, that's probably, 20 million devices a year for the considerable future, especially now that it's tied to a good operating system. Because it wasn't the keyboard that was hurting them with those specific people. it was the hourglassing, the complete bad app experience and everything else. So RIM can carve up these markets. And I think between the keyboard market, the low-cost international segmented data plan market, the enterprise market where you need corporate liable devices that are certified, there's all these little pieces where RIM, you add it up together, and I think they're still doing okay for a while.
It's a piece of pie.
Yeah, it's a smaller piece of a very big pie, but it's a pie that can be sustainable.
So let's go around quickly and wrap this up, and we'll go basically. So tomorrow on iMore, we're going to do the iPad Mini and the Mac event. It kicks off 1 p.m. Eastern time, 10 a.m. Pacific time. We'll have all your usual Mobile Nations color, context, and commentary. And then there's a small Samsung event the next day, right, Phil? A party?
Yeah. So it's for the Galaxy Note 2 in New York, and we'll have Andrew Vaca up there. It's more of a launch party than anything else. I mean, they've all been announced. We've got street dates for a couple of them. So that'll be Wednesday night.
And your bigger events?
What's that?
Your bigger events?
Monday is the Google event, also in New York. So I will be there. So we will have all sorts of stuff. Monday night is a T-Mobile showcase. I will go swing by because I'm sure they'll have Android there and probably some Windows Phone stuff too as well.
The T-Mobile girl, maybe?
Maybe.
And is that the last Google event you expect for the year?
Probably. We'll see. Okay. I mean, you never know. In fact, we've only had one phone announced during this podcast today, so it's a slow day.
And Dan, Microsoft is not content with one event, so you're going to do 2 events. Is that right?
Well, there's a couple. There's the October 26th Windows 8 launch. I won't be there for that. Although there is an Asus event on Thursday, which I may attend. That's their launch party for all their Windows 8 stuff, including tablets and PCs. Which the Windows 8 PCs are really great, by the way. They all have touch screens, really impressive hardware. The Ultrabook thing is getting pushed big time. So go check out some of the Windows 8 stuff. They're available for pre-order, and they're really nice. But then, come Monday, we have the Windows Phone 8 launch. That's 10 a.m. Pacific time. That'll be in San Francisco. Very excited about that. I love San Fran, obviously. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, too. I forgot. Is Build. So that's Microsoft's big developer conference. They're building the largest tent in North America as we speak on Microsoft's campus for this event. Now, Build has always been big, but this appears because it's Windows 8, it's Windows Phone 8, it's the Xbox, Surface tablets, all that's coming together. This seems to going to be the biggest, most impressive Build event out there. So we'll be live out there covering it, streaming it, writing up stories. So make sure you check that out because we're going to really see this whole vision Microsoft's come together basically next week.
Is there truth to the rumor that you're going to jump from lower Earth orbit to the event, Dan?
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, wearing some goggles or something, maybe. Yeah.
You're broadcasted over Microsoft Live. Kevin, you don't have any big event, but RIM is continuing to do these small jam events. Is that correct?
Well, there's small jam events which are happening regionally on a super small city by city local basis, anywhere from 30 to 100 people attending them. But they do have 2 of the bigger developer events coming up. So they had in San Jose the BlackBerry Jam Americas event a few weeks ago. At the end of November, there is BlackBerry Jam Asia, which I found out on Friday I'm actually attending. So I'll be going to Bangkok, Thailand, end of next month, which is exciting. Early 2013, I think we'll see BB10 launch. And then there's another Jam Europe event in Amsterdam in February. So the timing of how these developer events line up with the actual release of BB10 in 2013 will be interesting to watch. And and I think, for me personally, I'm still rocking and rolling all the competition on my little Kevin Mobile Nations World Tour event. And, guys, I want us to do another one of our round robin events. It's been forever since we've done one.
Let's do it.
I think we need to rebrand it a little bit because maybe like Mobile Nations Summit or maybe World Tour or something a little more Mobile Nations themed. But I was trying to figure out the timing because now there's, iPhone 5's out. There's always a new Android device. We've got Windows Phone 8. I really want BlackBerry 10 to fully be a part of it, which means maybe we have to do it in 2013.
Can we bring Marcus too?
Maybe November we could do just a little impromptu, a couple dedicated podcasts. I think most of us have the competition. I'm going to pick up a Lumia 920, and I've got a delivery guy knocking on my door. So go with me for a second there.
All right.
That's the 920.
That's the 920 arriving. So I mean, it's an absolutely exciting time. And Marcus, we're going to drag you along for the world tour this time too, just to keep us fair and honest.
That sounds like a plan.
Because I think you're fully decked out with 3 of every devices now already.
Well, I'll keep you guys in line, making sure there's not too much, fanboyism inside each platform.
All right. So, Kevin, where can we find out more about you?
On crackberry.com or the Twitter at crackberrykevin and whatever that new fandangle.
At CBK on app.net.
There you go.
Nice. What about you, Marcus?
You can find me on Twitter at M. Adolfsson. And if the servers are down, you can drop me an email and yell at me. That's right.
You can find Marcus on every single site, just in the forums somewhere taking care of things. Phil Nickinson? That's you, Phil. You've got to unmute. That's how that
mute
works.
Button. I have airplanes flying overhead, so I have to mute every now and then. No, I'm Phil Nickinson everywhere. Twitter, Google Plus,
verified,
plus Phil Nickinson.
Yeah,
app.net, everything, whatever,
and AndroidCentral.com.
Yes.
Daniel Rubino, sir.
Of course, you can find me at WP Central, and we've got a lot of stuff coming this month actually for the site, including our new app update, which is going to be very cool. You can also find me on Twitter, Daniel_Rubino, where I like to get invite people on Twitter. You can come join that. But yeah. Pay attention next week. It's going to be a really exciting time.
And you can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find all of us at iMore. You can email us at podcast@imore.com or just leave a comment on the show when it goes live. For all of our shows, including the Crackberry podcast, Android Central podcast, WP Central podcast, iMore podcast, and many more, check out mobilenations.com/shows. And Kevin, we should do a couple World Tour podcasts fairly soon.
I think so. It's time. I want to pick up that Lumia 920. I've been actually using my Dev Alpha hardware, which is really exciting because it's kind of like I have a BB10 phone, even though it's not fully a BB10 phone. So yeah, let's do it this month or next month, November.
Okay, it's on.
Woohoo.
Kevin out.
Kevin out.